Welcome to Issues, a program that explores many of the issues that affect the city and you, the people who live and work here in this great city of Wilmington. I'm John Rago, and on today's show, the issue is education. Now, specifically, this will be a discussion about standardized testing, different types of public schools, specifically charter and public, and finally, a look at the student dropout problem. Joining me today are Delaware's Secretary of Education, Mark Murphy, the Deputy Superintendent of the Red Clay School District, Dr. Hugh Broomall, a parent with a child in public school and a PTA member, Tizzy Lockman, and the President of Wilmington City Council, Theo Gregory. Good to have you with us. Standardized testing. Some say it measures only a portion of what makes education meaningful, and others say that these tests are definitely reliable or an objective measurement of student achievement. You say on standardized testing? Anyone?
All of the above.
Okay.
So yes, standardized testing does not measure everything that we care about in regards to the development of our children. We want to develop all sorts of things that we're currently not measuring by standardized tests, like a student's character and their grit and their resilience, their persistence, those types of things. But standardized testing plays an incredibly important role in our educational system. It gives students, it gives parents, it gives teachers information about how students are progressing so that we can know whether they're on a path to be ready for success beyond high school. And overwhelmingly, surveys show that parents support standardized testing, and actually overwhelmingly parents say that standardized testing is meaningful to them as parents, and that their school gives the right amount of standardized testing to help them with a barometer of how their children are doing.
All right, parent?
As a parent, I would definitely agree with that. I value the testing that I have a daughter in 5th grade, so she's done several years of testing now, and it is important to me to sort of have a gauge of where she is and how she's doing, and I do think it's important, and I would never advocate for doing away with it. I think as a parent, and especially as a parent in the city of Wilmington, the only reservation I have about it probably has to do with the way I think kids and maybe more importantly schools get really labeled by the test scores that their students receive on average. Especially in the city of Wilmington. I mean, we see, a lot of troubling numbers, and I think schools get really saddled by that, and I think it drives people away from schools in the city of Wilmington. I think it opens up important questions about why those scores are low, but I think for me that connection between the schools and our perception of the quality of our schools.
Yeah. I think there's an overemphasis on the test itself as the barometer for success or failure. I think that Booker T. Washington said that success is not so much the end product, but the struggles and the challenges you had to overcome to get to the point that you're at. And I don't think the standardized test, in terms of success, it defines it as a number, a finite number that has to be at a certain level. But what about the growth and the challenges that one overcomes to equal success, in my opinion? And I don't think the test gives credence to that. You opened up by saying it doesn't measure resiliency, it doesn't measure character and some other things. But at the end of the day, it's that test score that's very important to everybody in terms of what is success and what is not.
I think the assessment is important. You need to have a standard for which we want our students to achieve, and the standardized test does provide that. It doesn't give you the global picture of what's happening in a school, and a lot of times a lot of attention is provided just to a test score when a school can bring so much more with their social programs, programs in developing character and grit, and the assessment just gives us one measurement of where that school stands.
Yeah, how do you not then be labeled? You raise the issue of, especially in the city of Wilmington, schools being labeled. Well, then, if a school is labeled, then what do you do about it? I guess that's the issue. I mean, what do you do about the scores?
Let me tell you what I did. I came out of the Community Legal Aid Society, which is a nonprofit. That was my first job. I had an internship. Then I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. As a federal prosecutor, I was an assistant United States attorney. And how do you measure the success or failure of a law firm? It's certainly, you can't measure it based on number of wins, because so much is settlement and trying to resolve a matter through compromise. What would happen would be these institutions would come in, other regional institutions would come in and evaluate the school. And they would, let's say, evaluate it in terms of 10 components. And they would spend the whole week there. And they would talk to everybody from the janitor to our customers, to everybody in the office. They would go into the community, and what they were trying to assess is whether or not this is an environment that, if it's done based on theory and what we hear in practice, then yes, they are doing what they're supposed to do. We can't say what the number of wins and losses are. I would like to see a situation where we evaluate schools, we go in, we do this institutional peer review, and we look at 15, 20 components, and we write up a report, and then we say, yes, if we leave these students here, they are growing, they are learning. In addition to the assessment test, I'm okay with that, but we really should look at the environment in which we put our kids.
So from the state perspective, we've been using two tools to grab a hold of a couple of the ideas that Theo mentioned, and one is that we've been using a comprehensive school review, which is this look, a comprehensive look at how the school is doing, and just as importantly, we've been looking at growth more in terms of academic achievement. How are our children growing in reading, in writing, in mathematics, and looking at those scores over time, so that it is not a one-time barometer of how the school is doing from that label perspective, but rather are the students who are entering that school entering and growing academically, which really is its core role as a school, regardless of where the child enters.
Is there any concern about, I've heard it expressed about teachers feeling pressure and then teaching a certain way just aimed at those tests? Is that a concern?
It definitely is a concern. I mean, there is a lot of emphasis placed on student achievement and what happens with the teacher during their work day. But for us in Red Clay, that's just one component that we look at when we go into a school. We have the comprehensive success reviews that the State Department puts on us. We have a district team that will go out and visit schools where you can get a sense of what the culture of the school is like. What is a teacher's ability within the classroom? What's a school administrator's ability within the classroom? Then you have conversations with parents, you have conversations with students, and you analyze that along with the test scores to see if the processes are in place for the students to be successful. They may not have reached that standard that has been set through the standardized test, but if the students are making growth, they're showing progress, the teachers and the administrators are instructing kids appropriately, that's a school that's set up for success.
How do we know how the schools are scoring with respect to the comprehensive assessment review and the other components? What we hear is the score on the test, and that's what we see on the website. Can't we get how the school is doing in these other regards that you're talking about?
But the CSR is a public document, and Mark can probably share more.
But it's not marketed, it's not talked about, it's not published. That's what those of us who say assessments are okay, but we need these other things to look at.
Yes, one of the exciting things that we're working on right now is putting together a much better set of information for parents to have via mobile devices, via a website. In fact, we had some parent focus groups in Wilmington just a few weeks ago talking about what type of information they wanted to know about a school as they were making their choices. We're actually looking to have that available for parents next school year.
And that, you asked that question because then that gives people a more well-rounded look at what is
at the school.
It's happening in that school and with that child or these children.
And you have to ask yourself, where did the majority of the population start and where are they now in this growth model? Have they created a climate for the kids to learn and grow in? If it's not a climate for the kids to learn and grow in, then you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve.
All right. We'll come right back. We're going to take a short break, and then issues will continue in just a moment. Thanks for being with us.
I want my Ed TV.
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 Now.
I want my Ed TV.
I want my Ed TV.
And we continue with issues. In the last segment, we talked a little bit about standardized testing, and in this segment, we want to move more toward public schools and also what I will call public charter schools. and take a look at, did I say that correctly? Public schools and public charter schools?
Absolutely.
I don't know if folks understand. I think a lot of people out there, and especially those who don't have parents in the schools, think that they're two separate institutions. You want to tell us a little bit about why they're not?
Sure. Charter schools are public schools, just like district schools we often refer to. So public schools are schools in Delaware where people can choose to send their children. Right? So many parents are choosing to send their children to a district school, like a school in Red Clay, or a parent may choose to send their child to an individual charter school, like Kawumba Academy right down the street.
So I should look at the charter process as just another step in the education process. It's something that offers a child something a little bit different, and it could be within a district such as yours?
It is in Red Clay. We have authorized 3 charters. We have Delaware College Preparatory Academy, Charter School Wilmington, and Delaware Military Academy. They each approach education from a very specific view. The School of the Sciences, the military, or the college prep system. They're public school students. They're treated as a public entity. And in Red Clay, we authorize their charter, but they have autonomy to operate their programs, their day-to-day business, as they and their board of directors see as appropriate.
Right, because some of these charter schools can be operated by for-profit organizations, right?
We do not have any for-profit
No, not
charter
in
schools
Delaware. Okay.
Not supposed to be.
Say it again?
They're not supposed to be for-profit.
Right,
But
yeah.
you can go to other parts of the country and you have aggressive for-profit.
Yeah.
I think that there is at least 1 or 2 for-profit in the state of Delaware.
In Delaware, okay.
Right. But since I can't be specific, I don't want to get sued. I won't say a name.
Well, that's okay.
But I do believe if you pull back a couple of layers, you'll find it's for-profit.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't want to muddy the waters because in other states you have the whole issue of the big conglomerates, the corporations taking over education. If that's not the case here, let's just go to statistics. And it's a national organization that says something like 15 to 16% of students perform better in charter schools on these standardized tests. What is the situation? Is that true?
So you see what you just did? You took your question back to standardized tests. And see, I don't think that's the hallmark.
Okay.
I think that's one piece of it. But you build into your question what you think success is. We can go, let's talk about the tests, and then we're going to go back, if you don't mind. My wife was a guidance counselor at Hodson for years, and she says, Theo, who develops the test? I look at these questions. She says, in my opinion, and we sit around as educators and we say the English teachers should write some of the math questions, and the math questions should write some of the English questions, and vice versa, and so forth and so on, because there's such a dominance in that particular profession. And really, what are you testing? I ask a fundamental question, and I don't design tests. Who designed the test? What were they designed to achieve? And who said it was right? Those are some fundamental questions. Someone, I guess, did some studies and some benchmarks and said this is what you have to be. Compared to who? Compared to what?
So I know we're supposed
see
to
what
be
I'm
on
saying?
charters, but I'd love to talk
Yeah,
about
let's
this for
talk
a
about
second.
this, yeah.
We are about to transition as a state to a new assessment system that will include a new set of assessments for students in many of the grade levels. And that assessment system is called Smarter Balanced. And actually right now, any parent or any student, any educator can go on the Smarter Balanced website and take the actual questions that students are taking. So you can see, what are we asking our children to read and answer questions on? What math problems are we asking them to do? And the whole assessment system, this Smarter Balanced assessment system, was built from the end goal backwards. And what that means is, what do we want our children to know and be able to do by the time they're done in high school so that they can be successful in careers in college? And now let's ask by 11th grade, by 10th grade, by 9th grade. And so for the first time in our country, we are making a move towards assessments that are lined up with readiness for our children beyond high school.
And all public schools are held to that standard, right? Like
Yes.
charter schools and
Charters-
traditional alike.
Yes, charter and district schools will both be utilizing that assessment
Yeah,
system.
obviously you're hearing, and the education system is hearing the criticism that these tests are too narrowly focused or don't give the well-rounded picture of a child.
Let me ask you a tough question. This is a tough question, in my opinion. We got DSTP, we got DCAS, and now we're going through a third system.
Yes.
So that kind of confirmed my conviction that why do we change? Because we find that the test is not that good, or it's flawed, or we need to go to another test. and we keep emphasizing tests.
Yeah, and I think that
So
the change
I'm
is-
the public, and I'm saying, well, what's going on here? Something's wrong with this picture.
So if I were a parent, I would look at the evolution. This is an evolution, and we in education should be constantly learning. And so if we're learning from DSTP and how to do it better, and we're able to move to DCAS, and from DCAS able to move to Smarter Balance, it means that we are learning from those experiences and making things better.
But you experimented on kids to get there, and when you experiment on kids, the ones who suffer the most are the poor
Well, I'll disagree with that.
and ones of color. I really do.
And as a parent, I don't have a problem with the narrowness, actually, as much as the weight given to the results of that narrow testing, if that makes sense. Because I think I'm fine with the test measuring a narrow segment of the student knowledge, but when the scores that are received from those tests are given so much weight, and it is a narrow area, then you, again, I'll just go with the labeling thing, you're labeling school on a very narrow basis, and you're encouraging teachers to teach narrowly in order to improve those scores because they know that their school and their job is being judged on that basis. So as a parent, I struggle with that.
Let me clarify the question you disagree with. When I put it in terms of the test, you do 3 different tests, and there's an experiment, it comes back to the end result of labeling not just schools, but labeling people. That's my concern. So you can give the assessments, and I'm okay with it evolving till you get it right. But along the way, I believe that people are put in jeopardy based on the labels you put on them in the schools. So I think that clarifies what I said.
I think so.
Yeah, that clarifies what I'm saying.
Well,
Okay.
but obviously you're
Tracking.
not upset that they're trying to get it right.
I'm not upset about
Right.
that. No.
Obviously, it's along the way as they got there. What are the consequences for children?
Right. I'm into this comprehensive assessment more than anything else.
Yeah.
You got to create an environment for people to learn in.
Right.
And then are they learning? And not that you have to be a 5 right now, but is this environment, could it potentially get you there if we continue with this environment?
Okay. All right.
And-
Well, go ahead. Go ahead,
Well, I was
Tizzy.
going to say, and I understand the intent that it's meant to give us a benchmark that the kids can grow from, but it does begin to feel, especially when you're on the ground in city schools, a lot like what really happens is tracking.
Yeah.
So students get labeled with this number early on, and then they get very much tracked. You know, if you're in a city school and you don't have the same resources as kids in another school, you really get put on a path that maintains that as opposed to
Yeah.
building you up.
Yeah, okay. Stay right there, and we'll come back in just a moment. Good discussion, and again, thanks for being with us. And we continue with the issues where we've discussed today's standardized testing. We began to talk a little bit about charter schools and in the public school system. Maybe we'll pick up there and let this continue to flow. It's a good discussion. Charter schools, am I wrong to believe or look at these statistics that tell us that kids are doing better in charter schools than in what I know as public schools, or maybe a school that I went to when I was growing up?
I don't think you can make a global statement that students do better in a charter school versus a traditional school. I think that's individualized to the child and individualized to the school program.
That's
Just
right.
here in Delaware, we see charters that are extremely successful, and we see charter schools that are struggling to achieve success with their students. And you have that same dichotomy with your traditional school setting as well. I think what has happened is people now are trying to choose what's the best school based on a test. And I think they're losing what the mission of those schools are and what those schools are trying to accomplish. So I think that's kind of where we've fallen at this point in time.
Tizzy, your child's in a traditional public school?
I chose a traditional public school for her, more or less in our community, because that was, I don't know that I represent all parents in that, but that was a value that I had as a resident of the city of Wilmington. I wanted to have my child in a traditional environment with other members of her community in the hopes that she would be able to receive an adequate education there as much as she would. I do have a lot of parent friends who have opted to choice their kids into suburban schools because it seems that, you know, there'll be a better opportunity for education there, and even charter schools.
But you're happy. I mean, you're happy your child's happy?
I have been. We've been from kindergarten to 5th grade. We've had a great experience, and we're looking to transition to middle school. And so I don't actually know yet the results of that experiment, how well prepared she has been for whatever the next step has been.
Well, wait a minute. Let me go into an emphasis then with an emphasis on charters. Let's deal with the criticism that the public schools are being left behind, or not being cared for as much as they should. There's new emphasis on charter. How do you square that with folks?
I mean, my opinion is it's not just charter schools. I mean, we have a whole choice system, so you can make a lot of different choices. Other schools within your district, outside of your district, magnet options, and charter schools. And I do think what it's created is when there's been trouble in your local school, I think it creates an outlet for parents to move their kids, which is a great thing on one hand. But on the other hand, it creates a disincentive to improve those schools. And I think we've seen...
I think charters can be an asset, and folk are probably surprised by that. While I don't believe in charters, I think charters can be an asset, and I think they should exist. I think we have too many of them now. And I think there are too many in the northeast and east of the city. What you get when you get that, it's like McDonald's. When one opens, they run to another. Some people are very committed to charter, and they kind of compete among themselves, and they tear one another down for about a year or two until the other one gets traction, then another one comes along. We really need to do something about that. But I had 6 children. One went to Votech. None of them went to charter. They went to Brandywine, Dickinson, all over the place. And I got to the point where I did use one went to Salesiana for a semester. I did use choice to take my daughter from, one went to McKean. One went to Yadupon High School. So I got into choice. Because I think you should have choices, and I think that charter should be a choice, but it shouldn't be a primary stream of schools coming through as a kind of this huge mega district.
If there are, that must mean somebody out there is thinking that the traditional setting's not working. I mean, the only reason why a charter school comes along is because someone thinks they have a better idea for pushing a child further in education.
But it's so complicated. Parents don't really study, you know, where they should send your children in detail. They really don't. They're running from something, but they don't know what they're running to.
Maybe I'm not
I'll put
explaining
it that way.
correctly.
They're running from something, but they don't know what they're running to, and they can't really articulate what they're running from.
Okay, if there's no profit motive in Delaware, in some states there's a profit motive, which is why people propose charter schools or establish charter schools. If we don't have that here, so then again, I'll go back to what you said. They're not sure what they're running from or what they think they should be running toward for their child.
And it's not always a running from, and it's not necessarily a deficit model or a deficit orientation, but an opportunity to open up a school that does things in new and different ways and an innovation for the education space that we can all learn from. And so this should not always be viewed as a negative. Many of the people I talk to who have opened charter schools over the last decade are doing so because they are attempting to provide a different type of educational experience for children, and one that parents often want.
Well, I don't think any of us stated charter schools as a negative. We really didn't, and we don't view it as a negative.
But just from my personal experience, I feel of the parents that I have had contact with over the 6 years of having a school-going child, most parents I know tend to be making a negative choice as opposed to a positive one. So they might be choosing a school with a certain theme or a certain angle, but oftentimes, you know, they'll say, well, I really wish we could use the neighborhood school, but. And so they weren't necessarily looking for a math and Greek school. That wasn't necessarily their dream for their child, but they're afraid of the neighborhood school and they wish that it worked.
Yeah.
So
now, and just recently, some legislators voiced their concerns that there are too many charter schools. So I was trying to figure that out. Is that just political, or is that again some legislators saying, wait a minute, we need to focus on the traditional public schools? Why? Now I know your superintendent, Merv Daugherty, was concerned too because it's drawing resources away from Red Clay. So too many charter schools?
I think we have to be careful on how many school options are available. There are only so many students in Newcastle County. And in Red Clay in particular, we already have 7 high schools. Adding another high school that's attracting from us, you are removing students from the traditional school setting, where there already are options that exist with 2 charters and 2 magnet schools. And there are only so many students from 8th to 9th grade that can populate a school before schools may become underutilized.
Yes, there absolutely are too many charter schools.
Okay.
Now the law says you're supposed to balance the impact on your district and the needs. I don't think that that's weighed in. I think what's looked at is the viability of another charter school, not the impact on the district. I do believe that one of the biggest flaws in the charter process is that in the city of Wilmington, we have no voice as to what takes place in the city. We should have a voice in terms of, and I don't know what their voice will look like, and I don't know what the thresholds will look like in deciding whether another charter school comes, but we should have a voice. If we were a ship, it would be tilted to the east side because that's where all the urban charter schools are pretty much. You have some others on the west side, but when you start talking about, and I'm going to shift gears to success of a charter school, I quickly learned that the success of a charter school depends heavily on how it's born, how it was given birth, its origination. Wilmington Charter, Delaware College Preparatory, and its problems in the inner city. You got Delaware Military Academy and all these schools, but if you're not born out of a certain socioeconomic standards, you're going to have challenges.
Yeah.
You really are going to have challenges.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm still not clear how you stop then the influx of charters. It seems to me that you then have to go back and look at your traditional public schools. You said it as from other parents you've talked to. They are, and I know the education secretary doesn't want it to be a negative, and I don't think it ought to be a negative. But I'm just dealing on what I hear people talking about. They do talk negatively toward public schools, which I think is a shame. But what do we
you
do?
can talk equally as negative about charter schools.
Right, and I think
If you go back to my motto of how was the charter school originated,
Yeah.
it's very important when you look at the success and failure of a charter school, you have to look at how it was started, and that dictates whether it's successful or not.
And I think the choices that parents are making, I think it's easy to misinterpret that as demand for something else.
That's right.
I think it's not that there's no demand for local schools that work. It's just a feeling and the perception that they're not. So they're taking the choices that are available to them. I don't think that means that is their top choice of the way to go. So I think we're misinterpreting the demand in some sense.
To Tizzy's point, we have seen an increase in public school enrollment in Delaware year after year after year. And so we are seeing parents choosing public schools. We are seeing that both in regards to charter and in regards to district. In fact, just last week, the Secretary of Education for the United States, Arnie Duncan, was here, and we spent a while at a charter school, and we spent a while at a traditional district school at Mount Pleasant High School. And Mount Pleasant talked about the tremendous academic growth they've made over recent years, and that is because we have been investing in improvements in those schools.
Okay, got to stop it right there. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate this discussion. It was good. We have to come back, obviously. That's all the time we have for today's program. My thanks to you, our viewers, and of course to our guests for being with us. We hope you have enjoyed this discussion. For Wilmington City Council and WITN Channel 22, I'm John Rago. Thanks for watching.